Good morning and welcome to Pilgrim Lutheran Church and School's virtual Sunday school. This morning, my background is from the country of Ireland. What a beautiful place, so green and a wonderful gift from God. So today, as I do the reading, I want to share a couple of things with you before I jump in. Number one, usually we show the text from the Kids World Bible so that you can read along. This week, the text isn't in that Bible, so I'm just going to ask that you listen. Also, I think with this particular story, it's important to take a pause before you listen to it so that you think about who each of the different characters represents. And the main message that I want you to think about as we read the story is that God sends messengers. So we'll talk about that a little bit after the reading. Jesus told a parable about a landowner who planted a vineyard and rented it out to some farmers. When it was harvest time, the owner sent his workers to collect his share of the fruit. The tenants beat one servant, killed another, and stoned a third. The owner sent more workers, and the result was the same. Finally, the owner sent his son, thinking they would respect his son. But the son was killed as well. The tenants thought they could take his inheritance if he were dead. Jesus asked, "What will the owner of the vineyard do to the tenants?" The people replied, "He will bring those wretches to a wretched end, and then rent the vineyard to other tenants who will give him his share of the crops." Jesus then said, "The kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce fruit." The Pharisees and chief priests knew that Jesus was talking about them. They wanted to arrest Jesus, but were afraid of what the crowd would do. So when you hear that story, and I ask the question every week, what does that mean? What do you think it means? Who do you think the characters align with? Why don't you stop and give that some thought and have a little bit of discussion? So when we talk about that from the viewpoint that I asked before we started of God sending messengers, I think of the landowner as God. He made this beautiful world for us to live in, and we are tenants. And so he's asking us to do something as those tenants. And because he's not here physically to collect his share, he sent some messengers. And those tenants acted in a not so great way. So I think about us as humans. Are we always being the absolute best stewards of our world? I think sometimes we need a little reminder. And so God sends us messengers to remind us. He even sent us his son. But the question that is raised is, what will the owner of the vineyard do to the tenants who've been acting very, very poorly? I think for that one, we have to go back to John 3:17, which incorporates our theme verse of our school year. For God so loved the world, he didn't send his son to condemn it. He sent his son to save it. So the landowner, or God, sent these messengers to remind us to be good stewards. And even though those tenants, which can compare to us sometimes, were not acting in the way that they should have, God loved the world. He loved that vineyard. He wants to see the vineyard grow and prosper and produce fruit for all of us. So rather than condemn, he's sending reminders. He will save us through reminding us that we too can act through love, that we have a responsibility to take care of the vineyard and the world and each other, and that we can do that. And if we do that, then we reap the fruit of those efforts in a peaceful and loving world, not in the type of world where people, just because they can, do awful things like those tenants. So sometimes we have the ability, and we certainly are tempted often to do the things that we can, but it doesn't mean that we should. We know that we should act with love, and that to keep God's message alive, we can be the messengers of his word and carry that love forward. So I hope you give this some thought and remember the lessons that we learned from these parables, and think about ways that you can apply it in your lives and in your households, of ways that you can be a messenger of love